March 14, 1967. Gary, Indiana. The air was heavy that evening, thick with the smell of fried chicken and the faint hum of a radio playing down the block. Inside a small, worn-down house on Jackson Street, a boy no taller than the microphone stand stood barefoot on the living room floor. His hands trembled, his eyes darted nervously toward his brothers, who were slouched on the old brown couch, watching him. 8-year-old Michael Jackson was about to do something no one in the Jackson 5 had ever dared to do, perform alone. The dim lamplight flickered as his father, Joseph, stood with his arms folded, his gaze cold and unreadable. The tension in that tiny room was electric, almost unbearable. Michael swallowed hard. He wasn't sure if he was brave or foolish for asking what he had just asked, to sing a solo. His brothers laughed at first, thinking he was joking. Jermaine shook his head, grinning. "You? Alone? Come on, man." But Michael didn't laugh. He just stood there, small, serious, and determined. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss another untold story. The year was 1967, and Michael Jackson was just a child in a family where perfection wasn't requested, it was demanded. Every night, the Jacksons rehearsed until their fingers blistered and their voices cracked. Music wasn't just passion, it was survival. Joseph Jackson had made it clear, the only way out of Gary, Indiana, was through music. And tonight, Michael believed that maybe, just maybe, he could show them something they hadn't seen before, but when he asked for a solo, the room went silent. Jermaine looked away. Tito adjusted his guitar strap. Marlon giggled nervously. "Mike, you're good," but, Jermaine started to say, then stopped, realizing the weight of his own words. The boy who stood before them wasn't backing down. There was something in Michael's eyes, something fiery and unfamiliar. It wasn't arrogance. It was hunger. Joseph sighed, shaking his head. "All right," he muttered. "Let's hear it." Michael's small hand gripped the mic stand. His bare foot tapped the wooden floor, unsure at first, then steady. The room seemed to shrink around him. Tito began to strum a slow rhythm on the guitar. Jermaine followed on bass, reluctantly. The brothers exchanged smirks, expecting a child's shaky voice, but then it happened. The first note left Michael's mouth, soft, trembling, but pure. Then came the second, stronger, bolder, carried by something far beyond his age. The sound filled the room, cutting through the stale air like light breaking through a storm cloud. His voice was soulful, aching, raw. Every word dripped with emotion he couldn't possibly understand but somehow did. Jermaine's smile faded. Marlon's tambourine froze midair. Even Joseph, the man who rarely flinched, lifted his head. It was as if time stopped. The laughter was gone, replaced by silence, and awe. Michael closed his eyes, swaying gently as the music took over. He wasn't singing anymore, he was transforming. His fear melted into rhythm, his trembling became movement. Every gesture, every breath, carried the energy of someone far older, someone destined. When the song ended, no one spoke. The final note lingered in the air, trembling like a heartbeat. For a few seconds, the only sound was the soft hum of the amp. Then Joseph's voice broke the silence, "Do it again." And Michael did. But this time, he didn't just sing, he performed. His small body moved instinctively with the rhythm, his feet gliding across the floor, his voice climbing and falling with precision that defied his years. The brothers, once amused, now played with fire in their eyes, trying to keep up. By the time he finished, the room erupted, not in laughter, but disbelief. Jermaine stepped forward, clapping slowly. Tito grinned. Even Joseph cracked a rare, approving nod. That night, Michael Jackson wasn't just the youngest Jackson. He was the heartbeat. The spark. The one who would carry them all to a place none of them had ever dreamed, but what no one knew then was how that moment, a barefoot boy demanding a chance, would change history. That night lit a fuse that would burn for decades, leading to stages brighter than the sun, audiences larger than cities, and fame that would both crown and consume him. As Michael grew, he would often look back on that night in Gary, the night fear met fire. It wasn't about proving his brothers wrong, it was about proving to himself that he could be more than just another voice in the harmony. He could be the song itself. The Jackson 5 would go on to conquer the world, but even among their perfect choreography and electric smiles, one thing was clear: there was something divine about the boy in the middle. Something untamed, fragile, and yet unstoppable. Years later, when journalists asked him where it all began, Michael Jackson would smile softly and say, "At home. In Gary. When I was 8. Few understood the weight of that answer. That night wasn't just his beginning, it was the night the world unknowingly met the future king of pop. In that tiny living room, surrounded by the laughter of brothers and the scrutiny of a father, an 8-year-old child discovered the power of belief, not just in music, but in himself. He didn't have the glittering gloves, the moonwalk, or the global stage yet. All he had was courage. And that courage would become his greatest weapon. The next morning, Joseph gathered the boys in the same room and made an announcement: Michael's lead now. The decision changed everything. The Jackson 5 would soon dominate talent shows, catch Motown's attention, and record hits that would echo through time. I Want You Back, ABC, I'll Be There. But deep down, Michael never forgot that first solo. The night he sang barefoot on cold wooden floors, trembling, and turned his fear into fire. Even decades later, when Michael Jackson stood before hundreds of thousands under blinding lights, his movements effortless and his voice commanding, a part of him was still that boy in Gary. The one who just wanted to be heard. He would go on to redefine entertainment, to break barriers no artist had dared to cross. But none of that, not the Grammys, not the records, not the fame, would ever mean as much as the moment a small boy found his voice in front of the people who doubted him most. That night, when his brothers laughed, he didn't argue. He sang. And the world has been listening ever since. The applause that night didn't echo far, just within those 4 narrow walls, but its vibration would ripple across the planet for generations. What no one could have predicted was that this 8-year-old boy's trembling voice would soon fill stadiums, break records, and melt the hearts of millions. But at that moment, all Michael Jackson knew was the sound of his own heartbeat. That performance didn't just impress his family, it transformed the Jackson household. The next day, Joseph called for another rehearsal, this time treating Michael differently. He wasn't just the little one anymore. He was the lead. From that moment, Michael Jackson stood at the center of every song, every note, every movement. His brothers followed his rhythm, not out of jealousy, but awe. Something had shifted, a new dynamic had been born, but behind Michael's new spotlight came something else: pressure. The kind no child should ever carry. Every rehearsal became tougher. Every mistake sharper. Joseph pushed him harder than anyone else, demanding perfection. The laughter from that night slowly faded into the echo of orders, the rhythm of discipline, the relentless chase for greatness. Michael would often sneak away after rehearsals, sitting alone on the front steps, staring at the streetlights. He could still hear his father's voice in his head: "Do it again." The applause he once cherished had turned into expectation. But inside, he carried a secret flame, a quiet belief that his voice was meant for something greater than just fame. It was meant to heal, to move, to connect. That belief became his compass. Within a year, the Jackson 5 began performing at clubs and local competitions. The small boy from Gary was now fronting a group that electrified every crowd. When they took the stage, it was as if time froze. Michael's movements, sharp, confident, almost otherworldly, captured audiences instantly. His brothers provided rhythm, but he was the pulse. People couldn't look away. Every performance became a story, every song a piece of his soul. And as Michael Jackson sang, he began to realize something profound: he didn't need to act older to be powerful. His innocence, his raw emotion, his pure joy, that was his magic. It wasn't long before word began to spread. The Jackson 5, 5 brothers from Gary, Indiana, were unstoppable. Their harmonies were tight, their energy unmatched. But even among the five, there was one voice that always stood out, the same voice that once trembled in that living room. The voice that dared to dream. By 1968, destiny came knocking. A Motown scout caught one of their performances and couldn't believe what he saw, a child who sang with the soul of a grown man. "He's got something different," the scout whispered. "He's got the spark." That spark was about to ignite the world. When the Jackson 5 auditioned for Motown in Detroit, the room was filled with tension once again, a haunting echo of that night a year earlier. Record executives watched silently as the five brothers took the stage. But when Michael stepped forward, it wasn't the same shy boy anymore. He was poised, fearless, and ready. He sang with fire, danced with rhythm, and smiled with pure joy. Berry Gordy, Motown's legendary founder, leaned back in his chair, stunned. "That boy," he said softly, "is going to be a superstar." And he was right. Within months, Michael Jackson's voice was on every radio in America. "I Want You Back" exploded across the airwaves, followed by ABC and The Love You Save. The Jackson 5 became an overnight sensation. Their smiles lit up TV screens, their dance moves inspired a generation, and at the center of it all, that same little boy who once begged for a solo, but fame, as always, came with a cost. Behind the bright lights and endless applause, Michael began to feel the weight of the dream. The stages grew larger, the crowds louder, but the boy inside him grew lonelier. He was just a child, yet the world expected perfection every night. He would cry quietly in his dressing room, the sound of thousands cheering just beyond the curtain. "I have to be perfect," he whispered to himself. "I have to make them proud." Those moments of isolation shaped him. They made him chase perfection not for fame, but for love, a love he felt the world only gave him when he was flawless. And though he never said it aloud, that first solo performance had planted both the seed of his greatness and the burden of it. As the years passed, Michael Jackson transformed from the boy with the golden voice to the man who redefined entertainment itself. But every time he stepped onto a stage, a small part of him went back to that night in Gary, to the boy standing barefoot, trembling before his brothers, before his father, before destiny. He often spoke of fear, not as an enemy, but as fuel. That night, fear had made him sing louder, reach higher, and believe deeper. "When you're scared," he once said, "that's when you find your truth." And that truth, that raw, trembling courage, became the foundation of everything that followed: Thriller, Billie Jean, Beat It, Man in the Mirror. Every song carried the echo of that moment, when a little boy found his voice in a small house in Gary, Indiana. It wasn't the lights, or the fame, or the money that created Michael Jackson. It was the fear. The laughter. The silence. The courage to sing anyway. Even in his later years, when the world saw only the legend, those close to him knew that inside, he was still that child, chasing the purity of that first moment, trying to recapture the magic of singing not for fame, but for family. And maybe that's why his music still touches hearts today. Because every note he sang came from a place of truth, a place where fear met hope, where pain met beauty. When you listen to Michael Jackson, you're not just hearing a song. You're hearing a story that began in a tiny living room on March 14, 1967, the night a barefoot child changed the course of music forever. That first solo was more than just a performance. It was a declaration, a whisper to the universe that he was here, that he had something to give, that no amount of doubt could silence him. And even after his final curtain call, the echo of that night remains. The courage. The voice. The spark. The boy who stood trembling before his brothers and turned his fear into fire would grow to become the king of pop, but to the world, he would always be more than a title. He would be a symbol of what happens when you dare to believe in your own voice. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video. Because every legend has a beginning, and sometimes, it starts with a single note sung in the dark. This is the untold story of Michael Jackson, the boy who stood alone, and made the world listen.